Hello, good morning and welcome. It's election morning, Friday, May the 8th, and looking across England, where the first results are now in, no overall control pretty much sums up the entire British political scene right now. My name is Anne McElvoy from Politico.
And I'm Sam Coates for Sky News. A remarkable night. There's a winner, really. Reform UK managed a clean sweep across a swathe of councils, particularly in the north of England. A drubbing for Labour. It's still settling on exactly how bad it is for Keir Starmer's party, but MPs seem to think it's worse than they expected. And a poor night for the Tories. Some improvement on last year, with the Green surge not yet evident. Those seats they do well in largely come after we record this podcast.
And all of that before we get the results from Holyrood in Scotland, where Labour seemed on course for almost certain victory 2 years ago. But the rot set in when Keir Starmer became Prime Minister, and the Welsh Senedd, where Labour sources are already conceding defeat.
Right, we'll give you the nuts and bolts this morning of the results. We're recording this just after 8 a.m, where about something in the region, about quarter to a third of the English council results are already in, and about a fifth of the seats. Right, so it's multi-party politics, so we're not looking at many outright council gains right now. So of the 42 councils that have declared, 8 went from Labour to no overall control. The Lib Dems gained 2 in Portsmouth and Stockport, Tories gained Westminster, and Reform gained Newcastle under Lyme. That's pretty much the sum total of councils changing hands.
And then let's look at the seats. The reason we can call Reform the outright winners here is because of seats and votes. They're broadly telling the same story, winning at the expense of Labour and to a lesser extent the Tories. So at 8 a.m, Reform had won 370 seats, Labour net down by 252, the Lib Dems up 36, Tories down 154, and the Greens up 26.
Well, Anne, I have come to sit with you direct from the Sky News studio, where I was up all night looking at the results as they poured in. Just a few immediate reflections. The biggest story isn't actually Reform winning. It's where Labour has been left after, a night of incredibly bruising results. We don't yet know whether Keir Starmer's going to lose in the region of 1,500, which seems to be the median sort of expectation, closer to 1,800 or closer to 1,200. But it's going to be something in the bad to terrible region as far as we can tell at this stage. And that's before we have Scotland and Wales, as you were just saying. And a couple of things really stood out. The first is that across all sorts of councils in the north of England, it was just wipeout for Labour in places like Wigan, where all of the Labour seats went to Reform. Now, Wigan is in Greater Manchester. You've got cabinet members like Lisa Nandy. You've got the sort of halo effect of Andy Burnham as the Greater Metro Manchester mayor, potentially the saviour over the water. You have even Angela Rayner not too far away, and Andy Burnham lives in one of the wards in that council area. Yet that went completely Reform over there. Or you go across to Hartlepool, where again, Reform, clean sweep of the board. They took some seats off the Tories as well as Labour, but we know how important Hartlepool is in British politics. It's not only Peter Mandelson's old stomping ground, but the failure of Labour to take the by-election in 2021 nearly cost Keir Starmer his leadership of the Labour Party. Or you've got Worcestershire, or really wherever you zoom across, what we used to call the Red Wall is really suffering at the hands of Reform, which is interesting because the Labour Party has spent pretty much the last 6 months talking about whether or not it should concentrate on reuniting the left, emboldening the soft left wing of the Labour Party, and stop focusing so much on the Reform wing. Yet you look at those results and you wonder, actually, whether Morgan McSweeney had a point all along.
Bringing back the ghost there. Yeah, that turquoise wall in my native land of the northeast is looking pretty robust, isn't it, after these results? Few reflections from me, just watching you bringing in those results overnight, Sam. One is the expectations management. If Labour can really manage to say that this is better than the worst expectations, it is not the worst so long as we can say this is the worst. Shakespeare would have put it, Shakespeare talking about not losing 1,800 seats and you come out under 1,500. It's a thin gruel, but it is a message that Labour consent. See, it's not as bad as he thought. However, we've heard it a lot. We've seen people in the studios overnight. We've been texting and talking to contacts this morning. There is just loss and sadness as a feeling in Labour. And to me, that jars with this overall message that we've got the grown-ups in Labour out there. David Lammy, you don't change the pilot during the flight. Well, you might make an emergency landing if it's that bad of a flight. We saw John Healey, Defence Secretary, one of the great veterans of Labour triumphs and routes, saying that's 2 years into a 5-year mandate. But that doesn't seem to fit with what we're seeing here, as you point out, losing to the right to reform, while Labour had perhaps been thinking it wanted to build the progressive coalition more to its left and soft left. Are you really saying, well, we're 2 years into 5 years, it's going quite badly on any interpretation here? And yet the thing to do is to stick with a prime minister when there's not at the moment, shall we say, much evidence that he is capable of change. He doesn't look like someone who's a nimble pivot.
As of just after 8 a.m, Keir Starmer has actually emerged from the number 10 bunker to give his response. And he's doing something quite interesting. And I've only got the words. And I'm interested to watch him actually on camera. He's trying to emote a bit. He's talking about he knows how hard it is. If you worked on a campaign to see these results, they're tough. There's no sugarcoating it. It hurts. I take responsibility. And then saying everybody wants change and I'm going to set out that change in the coming days. Tough days like this won't weaken my resolve. They will strengthen my resolve. Now, the problem with that, Anne, is that sounds very much like he's promising another reset speech, which I think is his fourth in the 2 years he's been in the job. And, you know, it'll come on Monday morning. It's getting pretty well trailed. Somebody actually said to me yesterday, they're having trouble filling it with actual policy because, you know, whether it's saying you're closer to Europe, what that actually means in practice, or whether it's floating new things that weren't in the manifesto, it's entirely unclear quite where you go, and that they're slightly casting around for ideas in number 10. I think Keir Starmer is simply trying to pull the trick that he's pulled before, which is to say, I am here and I will change, and I'm not going anywhere. So the question is, do we think that's true?
Well, I think he thinks it could be true if he doesn't leave a gap for anyone to come up immediately and challenge him before the King's speech. It does feel like a state of execution. But if that's what the Prime Minister, let's look at it from Keir Starmer's point of view. If you look at these results and if he hopes that he might get away with them being somewhere less than absolute Krakatoa for Labour, then he can say, I understand, I mean, you've just channeled it very well there, that I understand this, I understand your emotional reaction. I think he knows now that he's not seen as having an emotional connection to the party, the way he speaks, that slightly technocratic vibe that he tends to throw off. I mean, I think there's still doubts about whether he can change that, but at least he's going to say, I get it. I understand that I need to change. Sam Coates is looking at me very sceptically. But just to sort of plough on with how Keir Starmer could go at this next 2 days, he knows nobody else is ready. My guess is he will soften his position on the return of Andy Burnham, but in some way that throws that off into the near or medium future. So if you don't like the result, delay the implementation. So that is a way that he could go at this. And unless somebody is very brave or reckless, whichever way you look at it, puts their head above the parapet and says, I'm sorry, this is just not good enough, that's what he's really daring them to do. And if they don't do that, well, he slogs on through Reset 44, doesn't he?
Luckily for Keir Starmer, perhaps, the judge, jury and executioner of him as Prime Minister isn't you and me, but it is Labour MP. So let's get down to what's kind of going on in my WhatsApps. One influential MP, I asked them, how bad is it? And they said, well, we'll see. Unless he responds really effectively today, I'm not clear how he survives this. Feels like people think that this is much worse than they really expected. So that's one verdict from someone who I think counts. Another Labour MP said that they knew the emotional reaction was coming for others, but didn't expect it for themselves, and they now feel sick. And they say, I now see why this is a moment of peril in a way I didn't just hours ago. It's the collective grief and anger that could absolutely take him out. And I think they are looking to sort of gauge how he responds. And I've just been leaked this. It's the line to take for the Labour Party. And that says local elections are never easy for the party in power. And we know that for most people, change can't come fast enough. We know from speaking to thousands of residents in the past weeks that national issues and supposed Westminster dramas just aren't coming up on the doors here. Labour MPs are being told, don't blame Downing Street. And in the words of one Labour MP, the line to take is going down like a lead balloon. Let's blame the local councils. Now, here's where I think we are. I'm not sure that there is a cabinet minister or even a large group of Labour MPs just at this second ready to go over the top. I think the reaction to the suggestion that 2 weeks ago Ed Miliband was even talking to Keir Starmer about this immediately prompted potential troublesome cabinet ministers to sort of back off. And I think that maybe there is, a few more days we'll see. And maybe he'll limp on actually to the next crisis. However, Anne, I think there is a form of words that if Keir Starmer uses, he's out within days. And that is if he says, I will block Andy Burnham again. Yeah. I am told by people on all sides of the Labour Party, they are probably willing to allow him to stumble on for a bit, partly for all the reasons you mentioned. The rivals aren't ready. So long as he doesn't swear he a second time will block Andy Burnham. Those are the words that could prematurely terminate his premiership. And so it would just wait for that to be asked, because that is the moment I think that could decide things.
He doesn't seem to have much alternative at the moment to making that kind of concession, but he can still spin it out. It's the arcane ways of the Labour Party and the National Executive Committee, etc. So that at some point Andy Burnham comes back, but it still then takes a while. And that gives Keir Starmer thinking, the longer I can hang on, the longer I've been Prime Minister, that matters to me. It matters to my personal biography. I do think there is a challenge to that, which I've have had the WhatsApps overnight as well, which is Keir Starmer saying, however bad it gets, you start with me? I mean, that's a really difficult message, because it's all right saying the Prime Minister, but if the prime driver is to say, well, you just can't get rid of me, I do think that's beginning to sort of seep into the bloodstream of Labour as something a bit uncomfortable. If we could just turn to reform, but because that's a natural pivot from where we are now, and I was looking at my old red wall seats up in the northeast, we saw Jonathan Brash in Hartlepool, admittedly already established as having called for Starmer to go over Mandelson, but renewing that call off the basis of reform's performance. And I think we're just seeing a lot of those Labour MPs, particularly in the old red wall, not just worried, Sam, about the very good results that the reform can boast today, but also I think they're concerned that this speech on Monday, at least one of the headline ideas is, let's move closer to Europe, effectively away from the US and closer to Europe, banking on the fact, as Starmer and some of his advisors see it, that being the only out there pro-European party, apart from the Greens and the Lib Dems in the more minority holdings, that this is not really, I think, what those MPs and those councillors losing to reform want to hear.
I think that's absolutely right. I was fascinated. What reform seemed to have done, from what I can see, is capitalise on the Brexit vote 10 years on. Those areas where we have seen an absolute clean sweep are the same areas that were Labour heartlands, that largely went Boris in 2019 and have now pivoted all the way through to Nigel Farage's party and reform. And I think that is a fascinating challenge for them, how they run way more councils. There's no way that I could cut it. I think it's been an incredibly strong performance by them. And Nigel Farage, when he came out in the middle of the night, was sort of rightly jubilant. For me, it does not yet mean that reform will definitely win the next general election, whatever Nigel Farage says. When you look at national voting intention, you can see 5 parties bunched pretty closely. And the question may well turn on, do people want Nigel Farage to be Prime Minister at the time of the next election? But there is no doubt that it's not just Labour who Reform have been taking votes from. It is 2019 Tory strongholds that look like they've moved across.
Playbook from Politico pointing out that the scale of victories in traditional strongholds points to voters switching directly from Labour to Reform. Reform, as you suggest, I'm wanting to underline that, and also even showing that they moved beyond that 2019 landslide by Boris Johnson. I think there's still quite a lot of competition, if you like, for the spoils of that result. So something like St Helens and Merseyside, I see Reform are really sort of crowing about that and sort of sweeping up wards, getting near clean slates in areas that have long been dominated either by Labour and to a lesser extent, but substantially by the Conservatives. A very wide geographical distribution for Reform. I think this is probably the widest that we've seen, so that does give some credence to Nigel Farage saying we're on course for me to become Prime Minister. Well, that we won't know for quite some time. I think the question is just where it leaves what Labour does about this core message on Europe, because on one reading, and I think you've just referred to it, if that Brexit effect is still largely working for Reform, but there's a very comforting narrative for progressives, which is a massive regret, and everybody's got regret. But hang on a minute, well, it would appear not so much, right? So, of course, there's certainly people who have changed their mind, but have they changed their mind in sufficient numbers that if you do a squeeze and say, we're going to move closer to Europe now, and this is going to be the UK's future, that you don't then get an equal and opposite reaction? Who does it help?
Let's just spend a couple of minutes talking about the Tories. They're still in pretty heavy losses territory. I don't know what the final result will end up by. It might be 400, 500, 600 seats overall, but not perhaps as catastrophic. To my mind, the early results told two stories about that party. Pretty bad losses across the red wall for the Tories, just like for Labour. But there were just some interesting results in London.
Yeah, I thought that too.
Two mega areas where I think the Tories will be pretty happy, one Wandsworth and one Westminster, with the Tories actually winning Westminster outright from Labour. And again in Wandsworth, where that went to no overall control. But again, it was a straight swap between Labour and where the Labour seats went to the Tories. So the idea that the Tory brand is completely dead in all parts of the country looks to me to be wrong. It seems in ironically in that kind of urban professional environment, it seems to still have some pulling power that perhaps people had written off.
As long as it begins with a W.
Yes.
It has to be Westminster, it has to be Wandsworth. Anywhere else, good target with a W for Team Kemi. What's interesting about particularly those two councils, Sam, if we think historically they've been very important to the Conservatives, showing that they can govern locally very efficiently, very well, very innovatively. So can they use this to get back that reputation of just being operationally better to live under a Tory council than under one of the others? That was quite a strong driver for the Conservatives. We also have to say bright spot for Labour is holding on to some of its London targets, Ealing and Hammersmith. I mean, not entirely different kinds of seats, but it seems that they're just better dug in there. I wonder what you were making of, is the green wave a bit of at the moment, what's a very small wave? Foam on the wave? Or is it just that we might not obviously have seen the full picture for the Greens? Rightly, they're saying that they don't do well under first past the post systems. It's fair to say they've piled up some votes. They can't turn them so readily into seats. But we've had such a lot of attention on Zach Polanski and the Greens and the surge of the Greens and the progressive wave to the left of Labour. What we saw was actually the Lib Dems doing well against Greens in Richmond, in southwest London. Are we sort of missing a Polanski effect here?
I think part of it is that a lot of the London councils will count later today. But I have to say that Richmond result really caught my eye, because what you saw there was the Lib Dems continuing to run the council, no change in control. But it was a straight swap. 5 green wards all went to the Lib Dems. And I have to say, on my bingo card wasn't, politics going in that direction. Now, the Lib Dems have perhaps predictably jumped in and said, look, I think that there is just, in that kind of West London, quite wealthy demographic, a discomfort with some of the things that you're seeing in the Greens. I think the Greens would say, no, it's got nothing to do with that. Oxford was somewhere where Labour lost the council to no overall control. The Greens won 5 seats, but I saw Labour going, I think the Greens would have actually liked to have won a few more in a university stronghold. So those are straws in the wind, not a comprehensive picture. But let's just see where we get to. Remember, Greens came ahead of Labour in a voting intention poll not that long ago. So I do wonder whether some of the hopes haven't quite been realised.
Yeah, and I think it's fair enough to say, let's see what comes in the hour and the day ahead. I was just say, if you are the Greens, one is that their ground game clearly needs to mature. Fighting at this scale in so many places across the country is very different from where they were. So they have room to grow on that. I still think they need a couple of examples. That's all you need, really. You can say, what we did in X shows the potential that the Green Party has with this tired Labour Party and the shake-up of the multi-party system. I think they still need somewhere to say that, a kind of hero result.
That's right. The biggest picture today, though, comes back to Keir Starmer. Does somebody go over the top today? I think the biggest moment will be what Anas Sarwar and Aluned Morgan say about the, in the first case, failure to win, second case, loss for the first time ever of Labour in the respective parliaments in Scotland and Wales. I think that we will see on Monday Keir Starmer try and regain the initiative with the speech we were talking about. There's a rumour of a big mayoral event, several mayors, Labour mayors, getting together on Monday morning as well. You would expect somebody like Sadiq Khan wanting to have his say on the reasons behind what we expect to be Labour's drubbing across the capital. Then it's the King's Speech on Wednesday. Labour MPs only need to be in Parliament on the King's Speech day and then for PMQs the following Wednesday. And apart from that, there's the only 2 days in May they need to be in Parliament. Whether or not that helps or harms Keir Starmer, well, we will see.
We'll be back on Sunday, though. We're much more frequent attend.
We are going nowhere. That's right. We'll be back in your feeds probably about, 10 a.m, 10:30 on Sunday morning with everything you need to know that's happened since this moment, and then again from Monday.
I always wonder when Keir Starmer says, I'm going nowhere, whether the ambiguity of that statement doesn't hang in the air.
I'm Michael Gove.
And I'm Madeline Grant, and we're here to tell you why you should be listening to Quite Right from The Spectator.
Every week we unpack the politics, culture and ideas driving the news.
And occasionally driving us to despair.
It's a place for a perspective that you won't get anywhere else. Much like this. He was the multiple wenching, chicken wing chomping lord of misrule.
And with the occasional detour. Your mode of dancing I would not recommend to any pregnant woman.
That's Quite Right from The Spectator, available wherever you get your podcasts.